Caroline Schermerhorn Astor is remembered simply as the Queen of New York society. She was the woman who decided exactly who belonged and who did not. Her famous 400 became the ultimate shorthand for the most exclusive circle in Gilded Age America. It functioned as a social ceiling that no amount of new money could easily pierce. The familiar image is one of glittering balls, diamond tiaras, and a stern matron ruling from a Fifth Avenue mansion. Beneath that dazzling surface, however, sat a mechanism far more intricate and deliberate. Her influence came not just from lineage and wealth, but from a carefully constructed system of female control. Archives reveal it was a network of mothers coordinating marriage markets, matrons acting as gatekeepers, and women using drawing rooms as quiet command centres. Understanding Caroline Astor requires seeing how one woman transformed architecture, etiquette, and family strategy into an invisible government over New York. She possessed social advantage long before she was an Astor. As a Schermerhorn, she belonged to a Dutch Knickerbocker family. Their roots on Manhattan predated the American Revolution itself. The Schermerhorns made their fortune through trade and real estate. Crucially, they carried the invisible weight of time. In a city suddenly filled with steel magnates and railroad kings, that older lineage mattered deeply. It drew a line between families whose names appeared in early church records and those whose fortunes had been minted just a decade prior. Caroline used this background as her first strategic tool. It allowed her to speak as the representative of Old New York, signalling continuity, manners, and a shared story far beyond simple wealth. Marriage then added the missing piece, scale. In 1853, she married William Backhouse Astor Jr., entering the richest family in America. The massive Astor fortune, built first on fur and then on Manhattan real estate, gave her resources that matched her growing ambitions. Her husband, William, showed little interest in society. He preferred travel, reading, and spending time on his yacht. This disinterest created a perfect power vacuum. While other husbands sought to shape the family's social image, William largely stepped aside. Caroline instantly filled this vacuum, gradually becoming the public face of the Astor name in the city's most important drawing rooms. Her household quickly transformed into a workshop for manufacturing status. Daughters were trained from the earliest age specifically for the marriage market. Lessons in French, music, and deportment were not mere decoration. They were essential dynastic investments. Every social call paid, every dress chosen, and every season in Newport or on Fifth Avenue followed a coordinated strategy. At the same time, Caroline closely studied the new fortunes rising around her. Figures like Cornelius Vanderbilt and his sons possessed colossal amounts of money. However, their wives and daughters lacked the crucial invisible currency of old association. This gap between new wealth and old lineage created both tension and opportunity. Caroline used this divide to fortify the boundaries between established families and the aggressive newcomers. The physical spaces she commanded were powerful instruments as much as they were homes. Her grand residences, first the brownstone at 34th Street and later the mansion at 5th Avenue and 65th Street, were carefully designed stages. The famous ballroom, calculated to hold precisely 400 people, became a piece of social mathematics rendered in crystal and carved wood. Capacity itself became the justification for exclusion. If only 400 could comfortably attend, then only 400 were truly in. This limitation created artificial scarcity, which dramatically increased the value of every single invitation. Behind the grace of the interiors lay strict, sophisticated control. Hidden service corridors allowed armies of staff to move completely unseen. This architecture created the illusion that effortless hospitality simply flowed naturally from the hostess. In reality, these rooms were finely tuned machines. They converted calling cards, seating plans, and invitations into measurable, essential influence. Caroline did not govern society alone. Her greatest strength lay in her ability to coordinate a quiet coalition of other powerful women. Ward McAllister, the social commentator, often gets credit for popularizing the idea of the 400. Records reveal a deeper pattern. He functioned largely as a public spokesman for a female council. In practice, Caroline worked through a network of society matrons. They shared information, compared notes on families, and closed ranks to enforce social policy. If one woman decided a particular family was not acceptable, the others often followed suit. This was not random snobbery, it was a protective mechanism designed to serve their own families. Keeping out too many new families preserved the pool of acceptable marriage prospects for their own daughters and nieces. This mother-daughter dynamic formed the true heart of the entire system. Caroline prepared her daughters not only to marry well, but also to uphold the family's exacting standards once they were married. A daughter's engagement was never simply a romantic success. It represented a strategic alliance with another family network and another group of coordinating women. The mothers involved examined each other with the same intensity they applied to the young couple. Income mattered, certainly, but so did background, manners, and social reliability. A discreet, well-bred mother-in-law could strengthen the circle. A careless one could quickly bring unwanted relatives into the delicate system. Within every family, hierarchies formed early. Daughters with more beauty or a more compliant temperament often received more focused attention and better prospects. Those who resisted parental plans faced gentle pressure that escalated into firm insistence. Sister dynamics added another layer of complexity. They might appear side by side in formal portraits, yet their personal and financial fates could diverge sharply based on maternal decisions. Dowry amounts reflected these internal maternal judgments. A favoured daughter might receive years of careful positioning, a prime wardrobe, and a substantial settlement. A less favoured sister might receive little money and few necessary introductions, managing a quieter existence in the shadow of the grand house. Account books reveal these differences in stark numbers. One daughter might be endowed to attract a titled husband, another financed only enough to satisfy minimal expectations. The system rewarded traits that supported family strategy and quietly sidelined those that did not. The system relied on more than just manners. It was supported by legal and financial structures. The immense Astor wealth, largely contained in New York real estate, was protected through complex trusts and carefully drafted wills. Male Astors formally controlled the legal instruments. However, women actively safeguarded the reputation that gave those fortunes their social currency. A major scandal involving a daughter or sister could ripple outward into business, threatening vital partnerships and tenant relationships. For this reason, preserving the family's female reputation was treated as a serious, full-time job. Marrying wisely, keeping households stable, and managing charitable appearances all fed back directly into the security of the family estate. This sophisticated pattern recognition reveals how 5 families that appeared separate were in reality interconnected. Astors, Livingstons, and other old families married into one another over generations, creating a complex web. From a distance, they looked like competing dynasties. Up close, they operated as one coordinated elite network. A daughter from one clan became a niece in another. The same architects designed houses along the same avenues, and the same law firms drafted nearly identical dynasty trusts for multiple clients. The system was guarded at the social entrances by gatekeepers like Caroline. Caroline Astor's famous enforcement of exclusion met its challenge in the rising Vanderbilt family. The Vanderbilts represented everything she resisted about new money. Enormous fortune without the tempering veneer of old lineage. For years she quietly refused to acknowledge them, excluding them from her most significant gatherings. This opposition was practical. Every Vanderbilt daughter who succeeded in the marriage market increased competition for the daughters of older families. The balance of power broke when Alva Vanderbilt, the wife of William K. Vanderbilt, hosted a spectacular costume ball in her new Fifth Avenue mansion. The event was so grand, featuring electric lighting and operatic performances, that ignoring the Vanderbilts risked making Caroline herself appear irrelevant. The story of Caroline's eventual social call on Alva, prompted in part by her own daughter's wish to attend the ball, has become legendary. It captures a rare moment when the Queen of Society adjusted to a rival woman's power instead of crushing it. The new money women had successfully deployed architectural and event sophistication to challenge the old order. Tati. At the same time, Caroline faced another female-female rivalry closer to home. As her son John Jacob Astor IV married, his wife Ava began to be referred to in some circles as Mrs. Astor. Caroline instantly responded by emphasizing her position as the senior matron. She reinforced the notion that she was the Mrs. Astor, while her daughter-in-law was simply Mrs. John Jacob Astor. This battle over a title was not mere vanity. It signalled whose visiting list mattered more, whose invitations could not be refused, and whose judgment on other women carried the day. The evidence of Caroline's control appeared in countless smaller mechanisms: calling cards sent and never returned, invitations that simply never arrived. A strategic absence from an event signalled disapproval more loudly than any spoken criticism. When she did attend a ball hosted by another family, that house gained instant, irreversible legitimacy. Other matrons followed her lead, sometimes with relief, as her preferences simplified their own daunting decisions. Ironic reversals eventually appeared in the next generations, complicating the story of social triumph. Some of the sons whose futures had been so carefully crafted squandered fortunes or damaged the family reputation. Simultaneously, some daughters who seemed like minor figures at the time outlived their wealthier siblings. Estate records show that the quiet daughter, considered a social disappointment or a less important figure, sometimes became the final holder of family property. The much-celebrated beauty who secured a coveted match might die young, leaving only portraits and glowing newspaper descriptions. The quieter sister, who was overlooked in the marriage market, gradually inherited control over the remaining assets. The very system that once relegated her to the background eventually placed the family ledger in her hands. These forgotten women, often unmarried or widowed, appear in records managing funds, organising benevolent societies, or acting as trustees. Their signatures are found on documents that kept fortunes functioning long after the ballrooms emptied. Caroline's position required layers of personal endurance and vulnerability. Her supremacy was not inherited. It was constructed through decades of measured appearances and deliberate control over access. She built structures resilient enough to outlast her lifetime. She also understood the importance of cultural contributions. Charity work, visible support for institutions, and cultural patronage softened the sharper edges of her exclusivity. Money certainly built mansions, but it also funded the hospitals, museums, and libraries that gave the Astor name permanence. As the Gilded Age ended, the rigid lines between new and old money blurred. Changing social values, economic shocks, and income taxes reduced the sheer power of inherited wealth. The carefully guarded 400 list lost its absolute grip, yet the underlying patterns perfected by Caroline did not vanish. They simply migrated into other, less visible spaces. Exclusive schools, private clubs, residential co-ops, and foundation boards took on the functions once performed by Fifth Avenue ballrooms. Women continued to act as quiet strategists, organisers, and gatekeepers for families whose names defined later eras. The tools changed, less reliance on calling cards, more on cultural leadership and philanthropy, However, the logic remained familiar and enduring: control access, protect reputation, manage alliances, and think in terms of generations. Caroline Schermerhorn. Astor's story sits at the intersection of personal will and structural power. She took the raw materials of lineage, money, and architecture and shaped them into a system. Her authority rested on a careful balance: enough inclusion to keep the circle vibrant, enough exclusion to preserve its immense value. Through that strategic balance, she turned a family fortune into a social monarchy that shaped generations. The common phrase, "queen of society," becomes both smaller and larger in this light. Smaller, because the gowns and tiaras were merely the visible surface of a complex social machine. Larger, because the mechanism she helped refine, female coordination in marriage and controlled access, continue to influence dynastic behavior today. Behind the ballroom doors, a coordinated network of women used etiquette as policy, architecture as infrastructure, and family reputation as financial security. Caroline Astor stood at the center of that network, not simply as a symbol of old money, but as one of its most skilled engineers.